Okay, so we are getting ready to mold this guy. This is the idle model that we talked about in our last video. So basically what's been done so far is we have taken the rough shape, the outline of the model itself. We used the CNC to kind of carve out a nice little pocket for it to rest in. We put in some clay, created a clay bed to put that guy on top of, and then went along the outer edge to create the dam line, basically. We're going to create a two-part mold for this guy. So we're going to pour silicone on the top half here, let that cure. We'll pop it out, we'll remove all the clay, flip it over, and then we'll pour the silicone on the second half. So that will give us two separate pieces that we can close up together when we do our pour. So basically what's been done so far, we put that base into this box that we created. We sealed along the edge with some hot glue and some clay just to give it a nice seal so that the silicone doesn't seep in to the bottom. And then we placed these acorn nuts throughout. That will give us a nice registration key. So we make sure that when we put our two halves of the mold together, it will line up nice and perfect. We don't get any off registration in that. So next up, what we're going to do is we're going to mix up some silicone and we'll pour it over this guy and let that cure so that we can do the second half.
In an effort to keep the any flash line from being just a coronal, split down the middle or split down the side flash line, what I've done is followed the contours of the sculpture itself in an effort to put our mold halves where a flash line will not be noticeable. If you look at it, the damming line, the clay line, goes behind the ear, then over the shoulder, and then back down to the center of the hand, and moves around all over the place. I did that in an effort to hide any flash line. Kevin's going to do things now.
I'm going to start pouring our silicone, part A and part B. We're going to mix those together, and we're going to brush on a light layer on our model to make sure we capture all the detail, and then we'll pour the remainder on top.
Also a bit of making sure we don't have any bubbles in all these fine little carvings that are in the model itself. So this is basically 45 ounces. We could do this in milliliters, but in this case we're doing it in ounces just because our buckets have better graduation marks in ounces than they do in milliliters. They're very American buckets. So there's 45 of each based on our volume of the whole. We're pot life on this stuff, this is 16 fast. Pot life is 6 minutes, so we have to work fairly quickly, and Kevin has to stir quickly, but not too quickly to introduce air. And the cure time, full cure, is 30 minutes, which is fast. That's why it's called fast. Start your pour down here, and I'm gonna do this really quick. Get some more of this.
Hey Mark?
Yeah.
Why don't you put your block on your side so Kevin can pour from his side?
Because I want to pour from that side.
Over here. Start. Tell me when.
Start. You good. You can move in and get higher if you want. You want an apple box? I've got the box tilted so that he has a definite low corner to pour into. We're going to start at the lowest point and let it flood up and like rising water and envelop our mold, or our positive, our master. And then once it's enveloped all the detailed portions of the master, I'm gonna lower that thing just and make it go flat, and then we'll pour the rest of it from that point on. Ready? Mm-hmm. Come in towards me a little bit. Okay. Something we noticed is where an envelopment happens, things go a bit weird.
How so?
Actually, it's mostly true when foam envelops itself. But basically what happens is that it ends up capturing something on the inside and then just pushing against it from all directions equally so it doesn't move. We've made our mold of our little idle guy. So here's what that looks like. And this is a test copy that we did without any functioning parts in it, but it's a test copy. And we did this by using this gold pigment. This is rich gold from Smooth On. This is not metal, it is pigment. And so the way you work this, and we'll right now, hey look, it cut to some video of me initially dusting the mold yesterday. You spray a release agent inside the mold, brush this powder everywhere into every nook and cranny, blow or tap out the excess, and then pour a clear resin. It can be also, you can also back it with a black resin, but it is, if you did just a clear resin, you would mix some of the gold powder in your resin, just a small amount. Now, the resin picks up the gold in the surface of the cast, which is great. But this pigment doesn't buff. So if you rub this with steel wool or something like that, it gets kind of dull, and you start to see the gold tinted resin inside. But this is surface powder. Also, if you rub on it, oh, it gets on your hands. You can clear coat it, but now you're clear coating it. And right now it looks kind of painted. So it's not really ideal. This may be where we have to go, but it's not quite ideal. Kevin had another idea.
This is brass powder. It is a actual fine metal powder. So they took brass and they basically ground it up into a really fine powder. And then it acts the same way as the pigment does. You dust it into your mold. You can mix it into your resin as well. But this is actually buffable. So once it's on the surface of the resin, you can use a fine steel wool. You can use your buffing wheel with some polishing compound, and it will actually shine up to a nice shiny metal. I've got a small example right here, just a scrap piece that we did with our scrap mold. You can see it's this has been buffed with steel wool and then on the polishing wheel as well. This was without any kind of tint, so it was just the brass powder and the clear resin. So it actually gave a really nice shine, really nice metallic finish. We're just concerned it's not quite that gold shiny look that we're looking for.
And while it's not quite bright enough, this could easily pass for primitive impure gold. So I'm not ready to give up on this. In fact, this is our best chance right now. So we're gonna go ahead and dust the brass powder into this mold, pull a copy, and see what we get. Now, one of the other problems we ran into, starting disaster, is as we poured this, there are horizontal surfaces, the tops of the shoulders, tops of the ears, tops of the base, and there's all this detail in here. And pouring this guy vertically, just pouring him in through the top, he caught bubbles throughout the decorative work in the chest piece, top of the belt buckle, top of the base. You can see this here. And there's a nice bubble in the top of each shoulder. So we're going to pour this a bit slowly now that we've got Kevin and I both working together. We'll rotate this and try and purge all of the bubbles up through the center as we go. So that's going to be something we have to tend in our pour, and hopefully we can eliminate all or most of that. We're pouring through a spout that we made in the top of the piece. We will grind that smooth, sand it off, and then just use some rub and buff or something else on top of it. And I can get rub and buff in, rub and buff is a buffable metallic wax. I can pick some up at the art supply store, and we'll get it in brass so that it matches the rest of the piece, and buff that guy out and hide our crimes. So we measured our volume as best we could. It's an overestimation, but we came up with 14 ounces of each component.
We have powdered the mold with our brass powder. We've got it nice and sealed up. It's a good idea to use some sort of rigid walls to keep your mold closed. We just use some painter's tape to keep that sealed up. And right now, Mark is mixing in some of the gold pigment that we mentioned earlier as a back filler. We were initially going to use the brass powder, but we had the idea that...
What do you mean we?
Sorry. I had the idea.
Dang it.
The brass powder is just going to sink to the bottom of whatever you're casting. So if you want it to stay suspended, you actually have to rotocast, and that's going to take a little bit with a heavy mold like this. So using the pigment, it's actually going to stay suspended in the resin better, so we don't have to worry about losing that powder down to the bottom of our piece.
What Kevin actually said was, holy crap, that's a great idea. I'm going to have to do that myself in the future.
It's true.
That'll save me a lot of aluminum powder on the stuff that I do. Yeah, that's what happened.
Not really sure why I haven't thought of it before, but there you go.
So good job, Preston.
Pro tip.
All right, so here's part A and part B going together here. We've got some footage of us doing this yesterday with the gold only. So it looks similar to this. This is front.
Yes.
So
Tilt this way.
actually, let me go ahead and just pour some in first, and then we will pause. Let's see if we can get a little bit better angle on it. And also, go ahead and tilt it. I'm going to So what we are doing here is trying to migrate all the bubbles away from those capture points. And at this point we should be okay, but excess goes into the scrap mold. When this stuff actually starts to gel, there's a hot plastic smell that starts coming off of it. It's fairly subtle. It's not really noxious or anything like that, but it's a nice cue that things are happening. And like I'm going to stop pouring at that point. If I need to mix another batch or something, it's just a good thing to know that it's going to quickly go from being a pourable liquid to a gelatin that just falls out of the bucket into a horrible mess and things, which has never happened before.
Stuff. All right, so we are about to demold to take a look at our piece. First, we popped one of our guys out of our scrap mold. Cure time on our resin we were using is 30 minutes. So at the 30-minute mark, we popped one of these out just to check to see if it was cured, and it looks pretty good. It's got just a tiny little bit of flex to it, but this guy's bigger, so it's going to cure faster than the smaller pieces will, so we should be ready.
The larger volume will contain the heat and help the whole thing kick off that much faster. And
Science.
so small pieces take longer than big pieces. So here, knife. Ah. Oh, my face.
Do the honors.
Well, less. Certainly less. Wow. Okay, that's a whole lot better as far as bubbles goes. We're going to spend a moment polishing this guy, see if he's going to take the way we think he will.
A little bit of flashing that we can just clean up with a knife, but overall, much better than the first version.
Much. Look, I'm happy. At least we have the beginning of the solution. We're most of the way there. This guy has a really nice metallic sheen. You're probably looking now at some footage of the two of them in comparison, polished and not polished. This guy definitely looks like a piece of metal. I'm happy with where we are. It can tarnish because it's real metal. It can tarnish a little bit over time. So we will probably put a fine clear coat on this, something that's not thick where it doesn't look like it's been clear coated, but that will protect our brass. Be sure and like and subscribe and do all that kind of stuff. Push buttons and make the channel better. Send us questions. Bye.